All right, today we're creating retirement income projections for a federal worker that is considering their options, considering potentially retiring. And what we're doing is creating a retirement income worksheet, taking a look at those FERS pension projections, as well as any reductions that might apply, taking a look at the special retirement supplement, as well as other considerations. So a lot of useful information here. Stay with us throughout the course of the video. And I do want to mention over the last few weeks, there's just been so many questions prompted by the deferred resignation program kind of coming out of nowhere, right? Questions around retirement readiness. What does our financial plan look like? And if you've been going at this alone, just know that you don't have to. Use the resources around you because these are big decision points and there can be real consequences. So we want to make sure we're making the best decision possible when it comes to being retirement ready and what your financial plan looks like. Let's get into it. Let's take a look at this situation. I'm going to share my screen here with you and we can see a little more details on this federal employee. So this family, there's a federal employee and a non-federal employee spouse. GS15, step 8, 28 years of service, age 58. So great career. And, they've been kind of thinking 60 was the magic number. In so many cases, it turns out to be the magic number if you can't quite meet minimum retirement age with 30 years of service, because it gives you an opportunity to go out with an unreduced annuity. In this circumstance, being 58 with 28 years of service, they're retirement eligible under MRA plus 10, but it would be considered early just because they haven't met that MRA plus 30. They aren't quite to 60 yet. So in that case, they could retire, but they'd have a reduction to their first pension. If they didn't want to take that reduction, they could postpone their annuity. But then, of course, you got to figure out what to do with your health benefits. You'd have to postpone those as well. Now, in this circumstance, this employee is considering the deferred resignation program, and Vera has been offered by their agency. There's questions around that program, right? And I can't comment on any of that at the moment. It's in the courts, so we'll figure it out together. But we're evaluating the numbers and does it make sense or not? Okay. And really, one of their big questions was, how much will my pension be? What reductions might apply? Does this all make sense? And so we can look at it, right? So with Vera being offered, that eliminates the early reduction penalty, right? So now you can go out full retirement benefits right away, continue that health coverage at the same time, and also be eligible for the special retirement supplement, which is big. So the calculations look like this. 183.9 is the high three, and we get that based on really their last 3 years of service. Okay, 2025, if they stick around, that number bumps up a little bit more too because of the pay raises we've seen based on inflation. Okay, so the pension calculation looks like this: 183.9 times 28 years times 1%, which would be their multiplier. Straightforward calculation gives me $51,492 annual pension amount. That's unreduced, immediate amount that would be available, okay? So that's a nice pension, but of course there are reductions. The early retirement reduction doesn't apply, but there's some other big things that we really need to go ahead and account for here. So as I mentioned, this federal employee is married, so we want to protect the spouse in this circumstance, and the survivor benefit program is probably the best fit. So in the middle section here, we're looking at, we got the base annuity and then the reductions that apply underneath it. So the survivor benefit premium works like this. It's a 10% premium for a 50% benefit. So your survivor would get a 50% benefit of whatever your FERS base annuity is. Okay. So we got the 10% premium there. That brings our base annuity down to $46,343 on an annual basis. I've also put the monthly amounts beside it for you to go ahead and take a look at. Some other reductions that may apply. FEGLI, in this circumstance, they don't have FEGLI. They've bought insurance independently, so that's not a consideration here. But they do have the FEHB coverage, and this is kind of based on their current premiums, about $6,500 a year. There's still a child on this policy. Cost, I don't know where costs go on this thing, to be honest with you, but we'll use this as a good estimate for the moment, $6,500. And then we're going to go ahead and withhold federal tax at 15%. That's a pretty good estimate for us at the moment as well. So when we take all those reductions off the annuity, we come down to $32,890 a year. Okay, so still a good pension, but some significant reductions that were important insurances that we need to cover to protect our loved ones. Okay, so also I just highlighted here for you the survivor benefits. So this is what your spouse would get. $25,746 would be that survivor benefit amount. Okay, and this is kind of what your FERS annuity statement might look like. All right, so we can see the monthly amount, $27.41, and then the annualized amount beside it, $32,890. Now, as I mentioned, this employee would be eligible for special retirement supplement as well, going out under Vera. Okay. And so we get to that number, we need Social Security estimates, and we've got to take the calculation in with the years of federal service. I've kind of run a basic estimate here for us to get a special retirement supplement amount for us to work with. Okay. And so that amount that I came up with, about $1,750 a month. And usually, the special retirement supplement is always going to be less than your age 62 Social Security benefit, just the way the numbers work out, the way the calculation is. So $1,750 a month, we annualize that. That gives us $21,000 a year. Of course, we got to take tax off that as well. And so we come up with a net amount, $17,850. Okay, so we'd want to go ahead and combine, these two amounts. It would give us right around $51,000 a year, a little bit less, but really close. Okay, so that's what we'd be working with based on the FERS pension as well as the special retirement supplement. And I've highlighted some big questions here. When to claim Social Security, I think is a big one, and how much income from investments. Those are additional questions that we need to go ahead and take a look at, which I want to do with you here in the video. Okay, so on to the next page, really kind of putting together a retirement income worksheet is what we're working at piece by piece. We tackled the FERS pension first. Now let's take a look at some of the other components. And you always hear me talk about this thing. So with the retirement income worksheet, we're talking about spending and comparing that against your retirement income sources. So on the sheet here, I've put our FERS pension, I've put our special retirement supplement. We get those two amounts. We're going to be talking about Social Security in the future. Both spouses are about the same age, right around 58. They'll be eligible as soon as 62. Will they take it at 62? Not sure yet, right? Because there's significant increases that occur between 62 and 67. Then, of course, if you delay it further to age 70, there's additional increases that occur. So that's a whole nother strategic conversation to have when the time comes. The SRS, I will say this, does make it a little bit hard to say no to the Social Security early, just based on being used to having that additional income if you do completely retire and you're not working in some other format, okay? So we've got our FERS pension, the SRS there. What else can we count on in this circumstance? Social Security we know is going to kick in at 62. Really, we're talking about the investment portfolio, okay? And I've kind of outlined this for you here in a bare bones kind of way. This is what their situation looks like. They've got a thrift savings plan with about $1.2 million in it. It's all pre-tax. They've got a 401k. The spouse works in private industry, worth about $600,000, also all pre-tax. Combination of Roth IRA accounts, $125,000, and then some savings on the balance sheet as well, about $60K. So right here, we've got about $2 million, close to it, in retirement assets, okay, that can generate income for us. Okay, so some things to talk about here. They also have, other assets. We're talking about home equity. They've got about $600,000 in home equity. We're not going to take that into consideration right now. They've really just started thinking through this stuff about what they want retirement to look like. So tackling the mission, vision, values, goals that we always talk about. They're working through those exercises right now, which I think are really important. If you haven't done those, do them, because they give you an opportunity for more success, and just having that clarity really helps. Okay. But so if we say, let's ballpark this stuff, we've got $2 million and we're talking about a 4% distribution. The 4% rule is not really a rule. It's a strategy. It kind of gives us a withdrawal rate that, when back tested, gives you a probability of success that's high of not outliving your money. Okay, so that's a good thing. We don't want to outlive our money. Keep in mind, it is based on a 30-year timeline and a 60-40 portfolio, which is important. I think a lot of folks right now are taking too much risk in their investment portfolios. It's something we need to talk about. These guys specifically, they're 80 to 90% equities right now. So maybe a hidden risk they don't even realize. So $2 million times 4% gives us about $80,000 a year in income, and it's pre-tax. So we need to take into consideration what the tax rate might be on that. We'll ballpark it at 15%. I don't know if that's going to be right or not, but if we take 15% off that, that's going to bring us down to about $68,000 in annual income from your investments. Okay. So I'll put that $68,000 up here. Now, a couple things we need to talk about. Accessibility is a big one. We talked about taxes. Accessibility with retirement accounts generally happens at 59.5. Now with the TSP, if you leave service at 55 or after, you can access your TSP, the pre-tax portion of it, as soon as age 55. So that's an important consideration when leaving service. Oftentimes it can make sense to think about doing something different, but you may need to consider leaving money in the TSP for that reason alone, right? You need some access to it. So So that's a consideration here. They would have access to the TSP. I don't believe this 401k has the provision written into it. Some 401k plans will allow you to access it at 55, but it's not as common, okay? So that's another consideration too that you don't want to overlook, all right? And if you add everything up here, I think this puts us at right around $119,000 a year in income, okay? Now, backing up a little bit on the top of my page, usually we tackle this first, but we've kind of jumped to the more interesting topic of the retirement income. The spending is important to calculate, and people have a hard time backing into this sometimes because it's tedious and we don't really know what we're going to do in retirement. What we found is, on average, people spend about the same as they're spending today, or potentially a little bit more. Okay, so look at your situation. I mean, if there's unique circumstances where major expenses are going to drop off, that's one thing you may want to consider. But on average, you might want to consider what you're currently spending as a benchmark for what you need to spend in retirement. And that's what we've done here. And I'm going to encourage them to go ahead and back further into the numbers to kind of see exactly, a little more granular detail here. But so they're about 10 grand a month, $120,000 a year, which this works out almost perfectly. Not by design, that's just kind of how it worked out. So they could make it happen. But I think the challenge here is you're pulling from an investment portfolio early, and you're kind of pulling at about the top rate we want to take, right around 4%. Okay, so that does put some stress on it. When Social Security kicks in, you're gonna have two Social Security amounts because that's going to take some of the pressure off, because right now we only have the one SRS to consider for the next 4 years. So there's some moving parts here, right? So is it doable? I think it's doable. Is it the right decision? It's going to come down to preference. And as you often hear us talk about, beyond the numbers can be as important as the numbers. How much is enough? How much is that time worth? A lot of people, when you ask them what's their biggest regret about retirement, it's maybe not leaving sooner. But you want to make that decision with caution and make sure that you're taking all the risks into consideration, leaving early, because all these things will continue to accrue with more time, right? Your first pension is going to increase. Potentially your Social Security benefits can continue to increase. Investments, if the markets perform well and you invest well, you make contributions there, those amounts will continue to increase. So the opportunity cost is there, but you're getting your time, which ultimately the whole point of all this, the reason we invest is so that we have our time. We can do the things we want with the people we love, right? I mean, that's what this is all about. That's an important consideration. All right, so what do you think? I don't know. I think this one's close. I think if they want to make it happen, it certainly can, and it could be a really good thing for them. Now, it does hinge on VERA, of course, and some other considerations. And one thing we didn't talk about is they may work. Okay, so may contribute in some meaningful way to the needs of the household. It doesn't have to be a full-time consulting job where you're duplicating the GS-15 salary, but there may be something out there that they're passionate about that they can do to contribute to the needs of the household, in which that takes a lot of stress off of, just the situation in general when it comes to your investment portfolio and just having enough income to do the things that you want to do. So I hope this gives you a little perspective and useful information as we kind of work through these uncertain, challenging times. As I mentioned, please use us as a resource. Don't think you have to do this on your own. As always, love to hear your questions as well and what you're working on. So please feel free to reach out, and we'll see you next time.